Welcome. This is David Bowles, Human Meme. Today's topic, knowing by mistake. We like to think we best learn from our mistakes. And yes, we are always best known by our errors and not our victories. Mistakes make us. And while all of that is probably generally true, sometimes we make honest mistakes that helps others learn from us as well. For example, in our building, a high-rise, it's a great big brand new buck of a building. We have a lot of young people living here, and a lot of first-time renters living here, and a lot of people from many different cultures and countries living here. And this is not a cheap building. The rent is too dang high, and so the financial bar to just get in the door to rent is quite substantial. But just because you may have a lot of money does not mean you are smart or intuitive or able to be mechanical. Having money only means you probably have the ability to pay the rent on time every month. So, it turns out there are a couple of common mistakes new renters in this building tend to make. Mistakes that the building staff have to set right, and they now do that right setting through both written and spoken and demonstrated communication. And I admit, when we first moved in here, and we were one of the first few people living here in a building of 900 people, the new technology was a little overwhelming. The dishwasher was super fancy and had no instructions. The washer and dryer combo were beautiful and complicated. Even the cook stove was a fascination of high technology. But I had interest and the internet and some gumption, and so I learned how to use all of those fancy appliances without too much trouble. And all the appliance user guides are online, and if you can decipher the images and the complicated language, you can know how to pretty much run everything without burning down your apartment. Only the refrigerator, new, interesting, was, in its own sense, intuitive in use and example. So I figured out everything, but some other people, neighbors, who may not know and who are too shy to ask for help, went their own way. And that reminds me of this infamous internet meme. What are the 3 most difficult things to do in life? 1. Admit you're wrong. 2. Admit you need help. 3. Correctly pronounce Worcestershire sauce. Okay, so back to the story. So, there were some people, young people, older people, people from different cultures who did not ask for help, did not go on the internet and do research. They just assumed that you put Palmolive liquid dish soap in an automatic dishwasher. And when their dishwasher overflowed with soap and water, flooding their apartment, they did not understand what was happening or why. You don't know until you know. Of course, you would think that dish soap would go in a dishwasher, unless someone taught you that you needed to buy special powdered discs of soap instead to mechanically wash your dishes. And so the world moves forward, and some people get left behind, not by choice, or by their choosing, or even money, but they get left behind, just because they haven't yet been exposed to know differently than their current cultural experience. Not knowing better, but just knowing differently. And if you think you're right, you're not going to ask someone or go on the internet and search for information that you think you already have. If you think you're using the right soap, that's the soap you're going to use. Until the inevitable happens. And you have to admit you're wrong. You just do what you've already done. Worcestershire sauce. The second example is this, and perhaps a little more dangerous, and maybe not as funny as an apartment full of soap suds. And this example has to do with the new cooktops in our apartments. These cooktops are fancy. They have no surface burners. The electric burners are hidden beneath a black, flat glass surface. So, my human meme friend, if you don't have any experience with that sort of fancy hidden cooktop, a cooktop that only reveals the hot cooking coils when the machine is turned on, you're probably going to think it's a flat-top grill, where you just pour all of your food on top of the flat glass top. And then you turn on all the glowing burners under the glass and you cook as if you have a giant stir-fry happening. Well, that sort of makes sense, right? Well, all of that ends up being a terrible, messy, dangerous situation. But on one level, it does make intuitive sense that you would cook on the flat surface and that you wouldn't need to use a pot or a pan. Because how would it get hot if it isn't being touched physically by a glass flame or an electric coil burner? And that cooking misunderstanding happened a lot in this building. And it tended to happen so much so often that a correction had to be sent officially out to all residents, explaining that since the stovetop was not completely watertight along the edges, many stoves were being ruined by cooking directly on top of the glass surface. Please do not do that. But again, I ask you, can you blame the people who didn't know any better? Can you blame them for their lack of experience if they weren't taught in the first place? You wouldn't even ask what was going on with the stovetop because it was clear the glass top was a cooktop. And you and your culture and your previous exposure to cooking would tell you that you already knew what needed to be done to get a hot meal in your stomach. We best know by error. Worcestershire sauce. You don't know until you don't know. And because of that not knowing, there was a lot of smoke and some fire in this building. And when the building staff figured out what was happening culturally with the flat cooktops, then they began to teach people from the beginning how to use all the appliances as part of a general tour when they moved into the building. And it has now all worked out fine in the end. And so, my dear human meme friend, we are left to wonder how many mistakes we make in life unknowing the outcome until the end is clear. Because we cannot know everything, and we do not know what we do not know. We struggle for meaning. We want excellence. We hope for perception. But there will always be times when we assume we know more than we really do. And our best hope against our worst endeavors is that we don't flood the house or burn down the building. But we also cannot be timid. We cannot live in fear of the new or be afraid of touching that dial, or using that soap, or scraping a glass cooktop with a metal spatula. We are divine creatures cursed with curiosity and hubris. We think we know, So then, by golly, we do know. And then we get wet and burned. And we have to stop trying to fly too low to the sea and too close to the sun. Too much salt water from the sea, and our wings collapse with the extra weight of the water upon our backs. And then we fly too close and too hot toward the sun, and the wax holding our feathers together melts, and we tumble headlong into the Icarian Sea, never to be seen or heard from again, except in art and mythology and the amber of suspended memory. And some of us find an afterlife in the minds of building maintenance staff everywhere. Worcestershire sauce. And all of that, my human being friend, is what it means to live a human life in a modern world. We change, or we drown in the sea, or we burn against the sun. And to have it any other way is to merely always live in a dank cave surrounded by a little bit of fire, while the whole rest of the world around us is spinning upward and out of control, spinning outward into the unknown future, where all the beasts of burden now have buttons and dials, and these new rude mechanicals are waiting for us to push them and to pull them, dragging us into the next realm of evolutionary, human existentialism. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.